Greetings and Namaskar. I am Dr. Shubho Chatterjee and I welcome you to this episode of the podcast Stories of an Era Gone By with Dr. Shubho Chatterjee. What if I told you that one of the earliest armed revolts against British rule in India was not led by kings, not by soldiers, but by monks, real ascetics, men who had renounced the world only to return to it, with fire in their hearts and rebellion in their hands. This is the story of the Sanyasi Rebellion. And trust me, by the end of this video, you may never look at Indian history the same way again. August 1765. The Treaty of Allahabad gives the British East India Company the Diwani rights, the power to collect revenue in Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. A corporation, a company becomes a ruler and India begins to bleed. Then came 1770. A devastating catastrophe had swept through the land, the Great Bengal Famine. Crops failed, villages emptied, bodies lined the roads. Historians estimate nearly 10 million people died, almost 1/3 of Bengal's population. Let that sink in. 1 out of every 3. Entire villages vanished. Fields turned into graveyards. But even as people starved and died, the taxes did not stop. In some areas, revenue demands were increased by almost 10%. No relief, no mercy. And in the shadows of this suffering, a rebellion was taking shape. For centuries, Hindu Sanyasis and Muslim Fakirs had travelled freely across Bengal, visiting shrines and surviving on alms. They were peaceful wandering ascetics until the British treated them like criminals. Pilgrimage routes were restricted. Donations were banned. Their movements were monitored. The British were blissfully ignorant and completely oblivious of the fact that they were pushing a peaceful order towards rebellion. And slowly, the monks began to fight back. Around the 1760s and 1770s, bands of sannyasis and fakirs began attacking British factories, treasury outposts, and revenue centers across Bengal and Bihar. Not random violence, calculated strikes, swift attacks, silent disappearances. To the British, they became ghosts in saffron robes. And what makes this story extraordinary is that Hindu sannyasis and Muslim fakirs fought side by side, sharing food, sharing risk, sharing one enemy. The rebellion spread across regions like Dinajpur, Rangpur, Murshidabad and Purnia. British records began describing entire districts as unsafe. Revenue collections collapsed in several areas. An empire shaken by men who owned nothing. And then came a name the British feared: Majnu Shah, a fakir leader, a strategist, a legend. From the 1770s into the 1780s, he led daring raids against the East India Company. Even after injuries in battles, he returned again and again. Under his leadership, the rebellion became more than resistance. It became a movement. The British struggled to stop them. There were no fixed camps, no formal armies. The rebels would appear, strike, and disappear into forests and villages. An early form of guerrilla warfare, long before the term even existed. The rebellion continued for decades, from the 1760s to nearly 1800. But eventually, brutal crackdowns weakened the movement. Leaders were killed, networks were broken, and slowly the fire faded. History did not give these men the spotlight they deserved. Their names are not as widely remembered. Their battles not as widely taught. But stories like this don't truly disappear. They transform. They travel through time, and sometimes they return in unexpected ways. In 1882, more than a century later, a man picked up his pen, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, also known as Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. Inspired by the Sanyasi Rebellion, he wrote a novel, Anandamath, a story of ascetic warriors rising against oppression, of sacrifice, of devotion, of a motherland in chains. And within its pages emerged a song that would outlive empires. Vande Mataram, Mother, I bow to thee. What began as a literary creation became a cry for freedom, a song sung by revolutionaries, a song whispered in protests, a song that inspired a band of freedom fighters and sent chills down the spine of the British Empire, a song that would one day be honored as the national song of India. Think about it. A rebellion in the 1760s inspires a novel in 1882, which gives birth to a song that fuels a freedom movement decades later. This is not just history, this is legacy. The Sanyasis who once walked barefoot through Bengal did not just fight battles, they sparked an idea that would echo through literature, through music, through revolution. Long before the Indian Rebellion of 1857, before nationalism had a voice, there were monks who chose to fight. And in doing so, they gave the nation its first whispers of freedom. If this story stayed with you, share it. Because sometimes the echoes of the past are the loudest calls of the future. You're watching Stories of an Era Gone By with Dr. Shubho Chatterjee. And this was the rebellion of the Sanyasis. I'll see you again in the next story. Bye.